Hey fellow gliders, today we're going to continue with our topic on glide relations. If you missed the previous video, make sure you watch that first before continuing with this video. There's a link in the description below, or you can click right over here. However, if you've already watched that first video and you have a basic understanding of how relations work, you're ready for this second part. We're going to talk about conditional relations, relations as conditions, and navigating through relations. Just to catch you back up from last time, we have this simple app where we have some topics, and those topics are related to certain lessons. And navigating into that lesson, you can have like the lesson content, right? And all this is done through relations where we're relating the topics to the lessons, and then also the lesson back to the topic, so we can display the topic image and the topic name on each of the lesson detail screens. So now you should have a basic understanding of how relations work. In Glide, relations are a type of column which link two different data sets together through a common identifier. In our case, we want to link the topics with the lessons that belong to that topic, and we're linking it through the common identifier of the topic ID. So you see that these three lessons share the same topic ID, which belongs to this particular topic. And so we're making the match between the row ID of this topic sheet to the lesson's topic ID column, right? And we're doing the reverse on the lesson side. We're relating this topic ID back to the topic so we can bring in values from the topic sheet, for instance, the topic image and the topic name. So again, we can display that on each of the lesson detail screens. So there's nothing terribly complicated about the way this is set up, right? We have our hierarchy of topics have lessons, and we can continue on with this, that maybe lessons have something else. Perhaps lessons have reviews, right? We can create a new table and we can name it reviews. And we're going to continue with our schema here, right? With our lessons, we needed to know the topic ID, and our reviews will need to know the lesson ID. So in our reviews, I always like to add a row ID first, get that out of the way. And then we can create a column for the lesson ID. And then from here, we just need to know what information we want to display about a review, right? Maybe we want to know the user who submitted the review. So in this case, the user ID. Maybe we want to know when they submitted it, so a timestamp. And lastly, maybe we need the actual review itself. And then we just build out an experience where we are going to create these new reviews from within the app. All right. So to do that, we can dive into these topics. We can go into a lesson, and then maybe we have a button on here that says leave a review. All right. So I'll add a button. I'll label it leave a review. And in order to generate a new row in the reviews table, we are going to use an action of the show form screen. So we'll do a show form screen action. We'll call this leave a review. And then to edit the form, you just tap on the button. And we want to leave a review not in the user sheet, but rather in the reviews sheet. And so a lot of this information we can just kind of pass along as hidden values here. Like we don't need the user to type in the lesson ID, user ID, or timestamp, right? We can trash each of those here. And then we will pass along using screen values. So values from the screen, right? This row ID refers to the row ID from lessons, which is the lesson ID, right? And then we want the user ID, which would be the row ID from the user profile sheet, which we don't have yet. Oh, so let's do that. Users. Let's go ahead and add in a row ID here too. All right, let's go back. Okay, so row ID, that belongs to the user ID field. And then lastly, the timestamp. So we can pass in the current date and time into the timestamp field. And then we just have them leave a review. So maybe we make this text box a little bit larger so it uses up some more real estate. If we want to do a star rating or something, we could do that certainly too at the top. Why not? Let's go ahead and add that in. So I'll say like rating. This would be a number column. And then we can use the rating component. We'll have the rating talk to the rating. And maybe we'll give like a 5-star rating. Something like that. Okay, so because we're passing in these values on the backside here, it'll automatically be written when we go to leave our review. All right, so leave a review. Let's leave 5 stars. Great lesson. All right, and now we'll see in our data that that's been populated. So now we can start creating some more logic, right? Some more relations. So in this case, we want to know which reviews belong to which lesson. So lessons have reviews. So that's going to be a multiple relation starting from the lessons table, right? Because lessons have. All right, so we'll create a new relation here, and we'll call this relation to reviews. And we're going to make that match in the relation of the row ID of the lessons to the reviews lesson ID. And we're going to match multiple because more than one person can leave a review for each lesson, right? But as you noticed, maybe we don't want our users to leave multiple reviews for the same lesson. So this is where we're going to start diving a little bit deeper into relations. And our first topic here is conditional relations. Now, Glide does not have natively a conditional relation option, right? When I go to make a relation here, it's not like I can specify anywhere in here that, oh, I only want to relate to items where the values in row ID matches reviews in lesson ID, and where the user ID is the person who signed in, right? There's no interface for that. So the way we do this in Glide is we build the condition first, and then we relate to the condition. So in our case, the condition is the user who is signed in. We only want to make a match here to the signed in user's reviews. All right. So that means we need to know which reviews belong to the user, right? And if so, once we figure that out, then we want to make a match between the lesson and that user's reviews. So ultimately what we need to do is we need to make that match, right? So we still need to make a match between the lessons and the reviews. And the only way we can do that is with the lesson ID, right? So we have the lesson ID to the lesson ID. That's what's going to be our match. But we want that condition for this lesson ID to only be if the user is the signed in user. Okay, so we're going to create that condition here. I'm going to add a new if-then-else column. So an if-then-else column is how you create conditions on the data editor. And I typically like to name my if-then-else columns what the if-then-else is doing. So I typically say something like, if it's the signed-in user, or if current user, and then I do like then. I usually use like this bracket for then. It's just my own shorthand. Feel free to pick something that makes sense to you. So I say like something like if current user, then lesson ID. Okay. So now we create our condition down here, and so basically what we want is we want the lesson ID to appear, right? So ultimately we want the lesson ID to show up in this field here, but we only want it to show up if this row belongs to the signed in user. And we can determine that through the user ID field. So if the user ID is the person who signed in, okay? So how do we determine that? Well, we can leverage our user profile here. This user profile, all of these columns or all these fields in the user profile flyout menu here belong to the person who is signed in. So in this case, the user profile row ID is the row ID of the user who is signed in right now. So we can make that match. So if the user ID of the review is or matches the row ID of the person who is signed in, then we'll display the lesson ID. Otherwise, we'll display nothing. All right, so now we have a condition here. And just so you see how this works, if I were to sign in as somebody else or anyone else, you see that condition results in a blank value because that person is not the person who left this review. Okay, so now we have a condition to which to make the relation. Okay, so again, the secret is creating your relation and outputting whatever it is you want to make that match, in this case, the lesson ID. All right, so now let's go back to the lesson sheet and make that relation. So in this case, I'm going to say relation to current user review. right? In this case, I'll make a relation. It's going to be a single relation. I don't need to match multiple because we only want our users to complete one review per lesson anyway, right? But we're going to make a match between the row ID of the lesson, so in this case, the row ID, and the lessons, not lesson ID, or sorry, the reviews, not lesson ID, but rather to the current user lesson ID, like so. Okay, so again, we have this conditional relation where if I sign in as anyone else, we see that the relation breaks because it's no longer relating to anything that makes a match for that user. All right, so this is a conditional relation in Glide. Hopefully down the way, Glide improves their interface a bit, where maybe we can start creating those conditions right here as part of the relation field, but until then, this is how we do it. So that's a conditional relation, but what's nice is that we can use these relations also as conditions for components on the layout view, right? So here we have this button, and we've already left a review. We don't want to allow our users to leave another review. So we need a condition on this button to hide the button if we've already left a review. Well, we already know if we left the review because the relation here would be filled out, right? It wouldn't be empty. So what's cool is that we can create a visibility condition for this button, and we can actually reference that relation. So the rel current user review, right? We have two options, is empty or is not empty. If the relation is empty, that means it didn't find a match, which means we didn't fill out the form yet. If it's not empty, that means it found a match, which means we've already filled out the button or already filled out the review. So in this case, we want to only show the component when that relation is empty, when we haven't filled it out yet. So we'll switch it to is empty. And now we see the button is no longer visible because that condition is no longer met. Now, if you want to display a list of all of the reviews that belong to this lesson, we'll use an inline list. An inline list is what allows you to visualize a multiple relation. So I'm going to add a new inline list to the lesson details screen. And you see it will find, or will try to find, different relations here. And in this case, we can see we can pick either single or multiple relations. And in this case, we want to view the reviews. These are all of the reviews that have been left. And so we can title this reviews. And then what we want to display here is part of the reviews, right? Maybe we want to display the date, maybe we want to display the rating and what they said, right? There's a variety of ways we can do that. It's just based upon what we want to say here, right? So in this case, maybe we don't want to display this ugly timestamp. Maybe we want to display a pretty timestamp. So here's a bonus. I call this pretty timestamp. Really, it's called relative time. I use the relative time column, and you specify a date. In this case, it's the timestamp. And look, it's now pretty, 10 minutes ago, rather than this more cold timestamp. This is more friendly, right? So we have this friendly timestamp, we have the review, we have the rating. Now, if we wanted to get some user information, like maybe we want to display the username and the user photo of the person who left this review, then we could relate this user ID to a profiles table. I'm not going to relate it to the users table because I don't want to expose this email address for all people to see. So if you're interested in learning how to create public profiles in Glide, make sure you check out the video in the description below or click over here on my most recent video on using row owners and public data sets. But in this case, we'll just leave things anonymous and just leave the review, rating, and pretty timestamp. Okay, so on this inline list, I like to view reviews as cards. And if they're not clickable, I typically use the outline card style. And then I can play around with what content I want to display here. In this case, maybe the details are the review, maybe the header is the pretty timestamp, maybe the title is the rating, right? And if it's out of 5, maybe I want to create a template column here. So maybe this, or I can do this number. Can I do something like this, out of 5? as the units. 5 out of 5. Something like that. Or I might want to convert that to stars or something like that, right? But you get the idea. And if I don't want to make it interactive, I typically set the action here to none, so that way they can't click on it. They're just viewing reviews. So far we've learned how to create conditional relations. We've also learned how to use relations as conditions. And for the last part of this video, I'm going to show you how to navigate users through a relation. All right, so we created this form button, remember, that will hide if you've already filled out the form. But what if we want to allow our users to access their review and maybe make changes to it if they desire? So in this case, I can create a new button here and reverse the visibility condition so that this button shows up when it's not empty, right? So I have already left a review. I'll change what the button says. Maybe it's edit your review, because this button will only show up once they've left a review. Let's go ahead and make the button a little less obvious. And to allow your users to edit their reviews, a couple of ways you can do that, but my favorite way is through the action of this button, where we're going to show the edit screen, and we want them to edit their review. Well, yes, you can show an edit screen of this current item, which would be the lesson, which we don't want. We don't want our users to edit the lesson. You could also allow them to edit through a relation, right? So the two relations we have right now is the relation to topic. Well, we don't want our users to edit the topic either. But we've also created that relation to the current user review. So when they push this button, they will now show the edit screen of their review. See that? All right, and then what I like to do is make that review screen or that edit screen look identical to the form screen. So that way they have a similar experience, whether they're leaving a review initially or if they're editing their review. So I'm gonna go and just view this app as anybody, so that way I see this button again. And I'm gonna copy this components, so that way I don't have to recreate the wheel. All right, let's view it back as me again. And I'll just press the button to view now the edit screen. And again, you can tell that I'm editing the review, because if I open up this data preview, you see this is the timestamp, that's the review, that's the rating that I left, right? So I'm now in the edit screen for my review that I left for that particular lesson. All right, I'm gonna delete the name and I'm gonna paste, so that way we see the same fields here. And again, we can make things required. And so they have to fill out a rating, they have to fill out a review, and then they can hit done, right? So if I change my rating and I change my review, when I hit done, we see that it edited the review that I had left. So at any point in time, they can come over here and edit the review. So this concept actually has a lot of application. In our use case, we're leaving reviews on a lesson, but you could certainly be leaving RSVPs on an event, or leaving feedback for a job application, or leaving comments on a post, right? So the ability to navigate through a relation, specifically even the edit screen of that relation, is super powerful. Not only can they edit their review, but you could even allow your users to delete their review in case they don't like their review and they want to start over again, right? And if they delete this item, they're deleting their review, which then starts that visibility condition all over again, right? Because if I delete the review, well, that means that the lesson no longer has a current user review, because that current user review doesn't exist anymore, right? So I can go back in here and leave a brand new review in order to re-trigger those visibility conditions. The last tip that I want to display to you is that, yes, you can allow your users to navigate through relations while they're in the app, but also you, the app builder, can navigate through relations while you're building the app. So in the data editor, you can navigate to any of your relations here. And if you double click on any of the relations, you can see what data is being fed from that relation. Not only can you see it and preview it, but you can also edit it, right? So you, the app builder, can come over here, and if you want to see what lessons belong to this topic, I can double click in here and I can see the actual data that feeds the app. And so if I notice that lesson C really should be lesson X, right? I can edit lesson C's information through that relation as I'm building the app. And we see the new preview right here. So hopefully you learned something new about how to use relations in Glide, specifically how to create conditional relations, how to use relations as conditions, and how to navigate to different screens through relations in order to improve the user experience. If you have any questions at all, feel free to leave me a comment below. You can always reach out to me at Twitter at @rpetito. And as always, thanks for watching.